Queria agradecer a todos aqui por mais esse evento do IBRAC, Análise Econômica e Defesa da Concorrência, Evidência Internacional, um paper produzido aí pelo Pontual, pela Svetlana, que vai ser apresentado aqui em parceria com o IBRAC e com a FEA. É um prazer estar de volta para a FEA. Tá? O IBRAC tem esse braço aqui de interação com a academia, e felizmente conseguimos voltar aqui depois de um longo tempo, né? A gente estava até comentando que aqui, nós fizemos um evento aqui antes da pandemia e depois não conseguimos mais, obviamente estamos voltando agora, e a ideia é que a gente estreite ainda mais essa relação para o próximo ano. Tá? Tem um projeto do IBRAC aí de estar sempre mais presente nas universidades, e a FEA é essencial nesse projeto do IBRAC. Então, esperamos novas parcerias aí para o próximo ano. E acho que é isso, só para abrir mesmo o evento e passar a palavra agora para a Fabiana e para o Bernardo, que vão apresentar aqui os nossos palestrantes, o contexto e conduzir aqui o debate. Tá? Muito obrigado.
Bom dia a todos. Prazer aqui estar recebendo o Pontual da. A ideia hoje é a gente comentar econômicas em condutas unilaterais. Né? Então, a Pontual e a Economia tem um paper muito interessante aí que eles vão falar sobre os achados em condutas unilaterais, trazendo algumas comparações internacionais a respeito disso. A Svetlana, ela é professora titular do National Research University High School of Economics e também é uma pesquisadora associada sênior do Instituto de Pesquisas Industriais e de Mercados da HSE University em Moscou, na Rússia. Ela obteve grau de candidata em Ciências PhD em Teoria Econômica na HSE University em 2004, doutora em Ciências em São Petersburgo em 2012 e autora de mais de 80 artigos publicados, especializada em defesa da concorrência. E, além dela, temos aqui também o Eduardo Pontual, como todos já conhecem, ex-conselheiro do CAD, ele é professor titular do Instituto de Economia da UFRJ, PhD em Economia pela Illinois, e também tem graduação pela UFPE. Eu passo aqui, antes da gente comentar sobre a dinâmica do nosso painel, para o Bernardo também, para a gente falar um pouco sobre o evento de hoje.
Bom dia. I'll just switch to English just for Svetlana to follow on this. Will be just a way of making room for them to present the paper. We will just play as like some add-on people. The floor is yours. They have a presentation that we will follow attentively. So please, floor is yours.
So thank you very much, Bernardo, Fabiana, Bruno. Thanks for IBRAC for the opportunity to come here and for the audience to take the time to watch our presentation. The goal of the presentation is to provide international evidence on the level of economic analysis that's used in abuse of dominance case and cartel cases. So we're talking about what we call conducts here in Brazil, and we're looking specifically at efficiency. We've been working with data from which actually cases, reading cases from Russia, Brazil, India, South Africa, from BRICS, and also from other jurisdictions like the European Union, the UK, France, and Greece. And so we selected a few cases that will illustrate how do actually those authorities go about analyzing efficiencies in some cases. Puder passar, Dora. Okay.
or not?
Clica no mouse. No mouse primeiro, porque tá selecionado.
Anda como expert.
I'll start in the first slide and then switch to second one, and then of course we will be talking back and forth during the slides. So as you know, the economic theory, antitrust is a very interesting area for us economists to work in, and also as a place of interaction between lawyers and economists. I mean, the object is economic one, but the decision-making process is a judicial one. In this sense, also the two subjects must interact and discuss how to come to the conclusion. So economic theory provides the arguments, and theory helps provide the foundation to conclude on the effect of a business practice. It provides how to define them. It allows them to, so we use the knowledge to describe and explain the actions of economic actors. So please know that, so these are two important ideas: to describe the business action, so we classify them vertical, horizontal, and also explain the reasons and consequences. The legal standards, or how under a judicial view, or judicial, either administrative or penal in the courts, we come to the decisions. We have something slightly different that in general, for example, in criminal law, when one starts with the consequences, then tries to find the actors and the reason. In economics, we do the opposite. I mean, in using antitrust, we have the actors, we have a supposed action, but we don't know the consequence. The consequence will have to, you need economic theory to understand whether the consequence was positive or negative in the legal sense. And that also creates a tension. On one hand, it creates the opportunity to try to investigate and understand what the consequences are. So under a law, it can be ruled legal or illegal. But on the other hand, it provides a burden for both the authorities and the parties to do the investigation, bring the arguments, and come to the conclusion. So since you have this burden on the authority to understand what went on and understand the consequence, we have the so-called legal standards. The legal standards, so what level, maybe in judicial terms, it would be easier to say what's the standard of proof. Here in antitrust, we talk about legal standards, which is the level or depth of economic analysis required to prove and decide the violation of competition law in a given case. So this is so we have the legal standard, which is what the authority will use from two extremes, how to come to a decision about the case. The legal standard depends on the legislation and its interpretation in each jurisdiction. So even if the economists can agree on the consequence of a practice, of a business practice, on the other hand, you still have the legal standard, the law in the books and the interpretation of this law by each authority to tell you how far the investigation should go. As I said, we have two extremes. The two extremes are per se, object-based, and effect-based approach, just to provide the background from what we are presenting here. So if an investigation or legal standard for a certain case is on the per se side, it means that the authority is very comfortable to come to a conclusion just by proving that the practice existed. Because it's from the authority believes that the economists providing an analysis such that there's no likelihood, there's no possibility, I mean, not even possibility, there's certainty that the outcome would be negative under the law, so you would have a practice that's illegal. So That's what the per se is. From the economic theory, the authority believes that there's no chance that such practice could not be illegal in the judicial sense. On the other extreme, you have practice and analysis that depends on doing the investigation in detail of what are the actual consequences of a practice, and if such consequences are positive or negative. Because again, if you go to economic theory, such practice, for example, vertical restraints, there's not only there's the high likelihood that the net effect was positive under the law. For example, under the law may suggest that consumers must benefit from the business practice to be considered lawful such conduct. Okay, and there's economic theory on the other side that says, well, in many cases or under these circumstances, yes, you can have consumers may benefit from the business practice. Given that, the authority believes, yes, we should go and really investigate not only the business practice which existed, what were the possible harm, but what were the possible benefits, and try to measure, come to the conclusion from what happened, whether the outcome was positive or negative for consumers. So we have the two extremes, the per se and effects-based approach. And for the effects-based approach, when we mean we, Svetlana, Professor Yanis Katulakos, Svetlana Dasheva, also from the High School of Economics, we've been working on the methodology to understand how to read the case, understand the economic analysis that's presented, how effective the arguments were used, not whether they were accepted or not, but whether they were actually used, and the authority did pay attention, going not only with those steps. So we can classify the legal standards from the per se to an effects-based approach by these 5 screens or steps in an analysis. So you first have there's a 0, which is just to prove that conduct existed. Next, the market analysis. Is there a possibility of harm? By concentration or by looking at depending on each authority, is there market power from the parties involved? So is it possible or not to have harm to competition? So we go with the screens: market analysis, competition restriction effects, so what are the theory of harm, and then the efficiencies. What we're presenting here is we review a few cases to see what kind of efficiencies have been accepted by as possible, not that they were successful in changing the decision of the case, the efficiencies that we're presenting. And then the authority does the balancing of the competition restriction that the conduct is likely to do, and what are the efficiencies, what are the benefits for consumers that were also likely, so it balances them out. So we have this methodology that go through the 5 steps. We read the cases and we classify the cases according to whether the information is presented or not. But here we're doing something different for the benefit of the discussion of the working group that you have at IBRAC on efficiencies and unilateral conducts, that we're looking at efficiency. But to see what were the economic arguments that were brought in different cases and how were they considered valid or not. So, as I said, economic theory provides the lenses to look at reality and understand reality. But at the same time, there is the laws by each country, whether they think that such practice is acceptable or not, or to what extent there's harm or not. So let's now, before we go to the countries, the examples themselves, it's important for you to have information on what's the legal standard that the authorities use.
So, simplesmente,
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. And as Eduardo already said, we focus on legal standards applied by different competition authorities. And actually what we present today is some indirect result of our very big research. Unfortunately, we cannot see the title of the slide at the moment. So let's start with some legal basis for application of efficiencies analysis. So in general, all competition authority distinguish between two big groups of cases, which are anti-competitive behavior of one big company, which is abuse of dominance, and anti-competitive behavior of a group of companies, which is agreements, which can be horizontal or vertical. So it's usual classification, and what you see on this slide are some norms in competition laws of different countries related to efficiency analysis in cases on agreements. So this slide is about agreements. And you see just wording of the particular norms that you can find in the laws. And actually meaning is always about the same. So agreements, anti-competitive agreements are prohibited, but there might be some exceptions in case if business practice contributes to improvement of production or distribution of goods or contributes to promoting technical or economic progress. So wording might be different, but the general meaning is the same. We see that such norms are present in competition laws in all countries but Brazil. I expect that Eduardo maybe give more comments on Brazilian law. In South Africa, wording is a little bit different. So they mention, for example, promotion to export, support of small and medium businesses, employment, but actually it's contribution to some economic progress. The situation, the situation is a little bit different with abuse of dominance cases. So in Europe, UK and Brazil, there are no exceptions for such types of cases. In Russia and South Africa, wording is absolutely the same disagreement. But for example, in Russia, there is a precise list of types of conducts for which such analysis is applicable. And in EBD, wording is different. A relative advantage is mentioned, which should contribute to economic development again. But again, the meaning is the same. So several criteria are to be satisfied in order to provide some anti-competitive business practice an exception. So improvement promotion. So these criteria are explicitly mentioned in European and UK laws. But something like this you may find in legislations of other countries. So the first criteria, improvement promotion criteria. It means that some evidence on efficiencies is to be provided, some explicit evidence, but it is not enough. It should be proven that these efficiencies resulted from the business practice under consideration. And there was no other way to reach this target. So it's an indispensability criteria. And it should be proven as well that consumers get fair share of benefits. And so it's something like the last screen in our classification of economic analysis, something like balancing of positive and negative effects on social welfare. No elimination of competition criteria means that anti-competitive effect was not big, was limited, and as a big part of the market was not affected. But it's out of our analysis, so we do not discuss this. We focus on efficiencies only. What is important is that in all legislation we see that the burden of proof is on the violator side. So it's actually an option. Efficiency analysis is an option. It's not an obligation. In some cases, companies are allowed to provide some arguments in order to justify their business practice. In case they do, competition authority is obliged to pay attention to this argument, assess these arguments, and react in some way. But it is not obliged to collect this evidence by itself. Switch.
That person.
The probability to meet efficiency analysis in antitrust cases depends a lot on the type of conduct under consideration. So in all countries, there are types of conducts that are considered extremely harmful, for example, explicit cartels. So they are presumed to have very strong anti-competitive effects compared to possible efficiency. So in majority of countries, explicit cartels are illegal by object. The same situation is with abuse of dominance cases, however, there are some exceptions. On the other hand, vertical agreements, the effect of vertical agreements on social welfare is not obvious. So there might be explanations related to restriction of competition or explanations related to some other targets of companies. And all competition authorities, at least it is wording of law, so that effect-based approach is to be applied. So positive and negative effects are to be assessed and balanced. Switch. Well, one minor note on the cases collected by us. So since the very beginning, we paid attention only to infringement decisions. It means that efficiency effects in such cases are either weak or they are not proved enough. So our database is a little bit biased. But I believe that even such cases, so discussing of such cases might be interesting and useful from efficiency analysis point of view.
If you allow me a few words. So just to make clear what examples that we're presenting, our database focuses for other reasons only on cases that were the parties were found guilty. So there may be other examples and other cases where, and particularly here in Brazil with your analysis, where deficiencies were indeed found that presented net positive balancing effect. So maybe what we will present is a bit pessimistic, but it's just because of our database. It's not that those deficiencies are never accepted in different jurisdictions. So, Clara, por favor.
Okay. So, and let's start with cases, and let's start with vertical agreements. And as I said, that is the group of cases in which the probability to meet efficiency analysis is the highest. Some theoretical, not theoretical basis, some ideas from theory, from industrial organization or institutional economics. So there are two ways to get a job done. You can do it by yourself, or you can ask somebody to do this. And in the first case, you control the quality, but it might be extremely difficult to do everything by yourself. On the other case, you may ask a specialist to do something, but contractual precautions are needed. And the same situation is with companies. So they can try to do everything from extracting natural materials, producing of intermediary goods, producing of final goods, distribution of these products, after sales services, and so on. So it's a case of vertical integration. But it is not feasible to integrate everything, so all related services. And we know that it is economically not reasonable, as we know a lot about comparative advantages, about the role of specialization. But what is more important is that internal transaction costs increase dramatically with the rise of the company. So it becomes extremely difficult to manage the most. And outsourcing is a condition, is the solution. So, but if you ask somebody to provide you with goods and services, you need to sign in a contract precisely what is important for you. Not to avoid unpleasant behavior of your counterpart, undesirable behavior. So, and this restricted, and the restrictive clauses in long-term vertical agreements are something, it's some kind of substitute to vertical integration, actually. So companies are not completely free in their business decisions, but on the other hand, they are not controlled by the only decision-making center. It's what is named hybrid form of business organization. And competition authorities pay a lot of attention to such contracts, as some restrictions look very suspicious from antitrust point of view. For example, quality standards look quite normal when you require some quality of goods and services provided to you. But, for example, restriction of prices, volumes, and territories look like an attempt to affect market conditions of the related market. And requirement not to deal with competitors of very antitrust. It's just a direct restriction. But it would be too naive to interpret these business practices only from restriction of competition point of view. And there might be alternative explanations. Well, and in our database, we have cases on vertical agreements of two types: resale price maintenance and exclusionary clauses in agreements. So resale price maintenance is a requirement to a distributor to sell the producer's product at a certain price. So it's actually price fixing on the downstream market. And the naive explanation of this business practice is that the producer is interested in controlling prices on the final or distributors, so control this related market, in order to get some commercial benefits. Well, that situation might be not so easy. So there is a competition, there is a restriction of price competition, of course, so distributors do not compete on prices, but it might be reasonable in some situations. Just imagine, for example, a car service center. So when we go to the center, we enjoy very company-style designed offices and specialists that can solve any problem, excellent time management, cameras everywhere for your safety, something like this. Well, it's great. This contributes to the reputation of the company, of the products of the company, and so on. So, producer and actually all members of the value chain are interested in good services on the stage of distribution. The problem is that spendings of these types are to be made by a particular member of the value chain, by a distributor. So all members of the value chain are interested in excellent quality of the final goods. But each particular member of the value chain might have some different interests. So all of them are interested in decreasing their cost of production. And this might be reached by decreasing the quality. So at each stage of value chain, agents have this motivation. And it is extremely harmful for the whole value chain, especially on the stage of distribution. So, but distributors will not invest in quality of their services if price competition decreases their profits to very minimum. So the idea is to provide them some guaranteed profit, but at the same time to require some quality of their services. So it should be several points in the contract on prices and on qualities. Only after that you may reach this target. So actually, the sale price maintenance may be an instrument to transform price competition in non-price competition. And this contributes to reputation, to sales, to benefits of all member chain, and to social welfare as well. But of course, anti-competitive effect is present. Next. And maybe the most suspicious from antitrust point of view business practice is exclusionary agreements when company requires from a counterparty not to deal with competitors, some direct clause not to deal with competitors. Well, from naive point of view, it's just rise of entry barriers on the related market, so decreasing competition for sure. So anti-competitive effect is obvious. But there might be some excuse for doing this. And this excuse, again, is related to motivation of the counterparty to invest in the quality of its services or products. So again, just imagine some distributor of gas, it's the easiest example. Suppose that a car producer organizes training for sales managers. It's specialized investment. And so it provides these agents with some specific information on the product, on economics of production, and so on. So they become much better specialists. But in this case, the producer is interested, these agents, not to work in favor of competitors. It's just reasonable, it's rational, not to allow to free ride on your investments. So, and in this case, of course, these agents are required not to leave the company for some certain period of time, and this distributor not to deal with competitors. So there is anti-competitive effect, but just imagine it is not allowed by law. In this case, the company would not have incentive at the very beginning to invest in training these agents. As in this case, there is a risk this would contribute to benefits of competitors. So motivation decreases, investments would not be made with all negative consequences to the quality, to development, to profits, and to social welfare as well. So, next slide. Okay, so, and now cases. Now, cases, we have actually, we decided to present 4 cases from our database. The first one is from South Africa. It's a case against the company Uniplate, which is a producer of embossing machines and number plate blanks. The case was decided in 2019. To give some
background. So what Uniplate manufactures the machines that take the placa, tem as placas do carro e elas chegam limpas, sem número, e essa empresa fabrica as empresas que marcam a placa, o número da placa. Embossing, yes, exactly. Embossing is a prensa. Yes, exactly.
Great improvement for our vocabulary.
So this is about, so they produce the machines and the plates, the blank plates themselves.
Well, I didn't know the terms 2 weeks ago as well. So the situation is so that in South Africa, they use 3 types of the machines and 3 types of corresponding number plate blanks. So the mix between machines and plate blanks of different types is not possible by technology. And the Uniplate is quite a big company, not the only one, but with quite a big market share. And the conduct under consideration is that the company required its customers after the purchase of an embossing, and Uniplate produces 2 types of embossing machines, A and B. So there are 3 types, it produces 2 of them. And it required its customers to purchase all types of number plate blanks from the company after purchasing of the machine of any type. So after buying a type A machine, consumers were obliged exclusively purchase number plate blanks of types A and B from the company, even having an embossing machine of type B produced by a competitor. And 10 years exclusivity period was required. Switch. Well, so we are not interested in discussion of the conduct itself, as our topic is efficiency analysis only. So what were the arguments of the company? So the main argument was the need to recoup its R&D costs on the development of machines. The company argued that it used the strategy of cross-subsidization. So the main profit was from selling number plate blanks, and it had to guarantee some demand for a number plate blank during a certain period of time so that to recoup its investments. Well, non-confidential versions of reports do not contain particular data and particular calculations provided by the companies. We only have some description what was provided. Actually, what was provided is the data on investments, the data on prices, the data on costs of production and distribution of the machine, just to prove that they were sold under costs, and some data on sales. So again, as I see it, using this information, you can count something like net present value of investment projects to prove that 10 years period is required to recoup investments. But it seems that the data provided by the company was not complete, so it was very fragmentary, and the competition authority was not satisfied with the data provided. So this argument was rejected. However, it could work possibly. Another argument of the company was preventing free riding and some quality control. So we see it is just what we have just discussed about vertical agreement, so preventing free riding and quality control. Well, the company argued that the use of number plate blanks of third parties on the machines produced by the company might be harmful to the quality of the final goods and might be harmful for the machines themselves. Well, again, as I see it, given this argument, the company had to provide some evidence, some direct evidence that such harm exists. So maybe some cases that machines were broken after the use of third-party plate blanks. Maybe some evidence that there were some problems with certification of the final products by authorized authority. But it seems that nothing of this was provided. Moreover, actually, the competition authority, on the basis of some independent reports, was able to prove that the mix of the machines and number plate blanks is possible technically and does not damage the quality of the good. And interestingly, the free riding argument of the company actually worked against it, as its practice was aimed to enforce its customers 10 minutes. Okay. Well, I'm trying. So we can okay. The last comment. So the free riding argument of the company worked against it. As its business practice was aimed to enforce customers to use its number plate blanks on the machines of competitors. So it is actually the free riding it mentioned. Okay, let's try to do it fast. So the next case is from India. It's a case again against a number of very famous car producers, and denial of market access of independent repairers is under consideration. So analyzing clauses of agreements between car producers and independent producers of car equipment, as well as authorized dealer agreements, the competition authority proved that it was not possible to sell original spare parts on an open market, both by producers and authorized dealers. So only authorized dealers were able to provide this service. Technical information, software, diagnostic tools were also not available for independent repairers. So it's barriers to enter the market on the level of distributors. So again, we have just discussed it. Arguments of companies. So,
if you allow me, maybe if you have recognized that it sounds like Ampapi, it smells like Ampapi, but it's slightly different. Here, the zero harm is with the vertical. It's not that the manufacturers of parts are complaining, but actually the shops, the repair shops are complaining they cannot access the legitimate tools, the original tools. So it's a vertical restriction. So the companies use the contract with the manufacturers and say, no, you can only sell to those repair shops that are authorized by the manufacturers. So that's why it's a vertical case and not really a horizontal case, which makes a difference. But it's very similar to the case in Brazil.
So it's something related. Right? We have a lot of such cases in Russia, but Russian approach is very different, very specific. So arguments of the companies. The first two are about quality, and the third one is protection of intellectual property rights. The comments on the quality. So they argued that this business practice was aimed to safeguard the buyers from purchasing spurious spare parts. So if it is known that original spare parts are not available on the open market, well, independent repairers are not able to sell spare parts of unknown quality as if they were original. So they would not be able to mislead their customers. And the companies also stressed that the quality of the service provided depends not only on the quality of spare parts, but also on the skills of the person who fits spare parts. And in case unskilled person provide the service, it might be very dangerous and harmful for safety of customers. The reply of competition authority was very easy. Let car owners decide by themselves. You should not restrict their choice, but in availability of spare parts on an open market. Let them take a risk. Let them make a decision whether to use the service of authorized dealers or to take the service from independent repairers. And the idea of protection of intellectual property rights was that actually many spare parts were produced with the use of trade secrets and know-how, and so they just didn't want to. So they tried to protect this intellectual property rights, not to allow to duplicate the spare parts, but by unauthorized companies, being unable to control the quality, But they didn't explain the mechanism by which selling of spare parts on the open market may harm intellectual property rights. So it was just a statement without any improvement, without any evidence, and thus it was rejected by The third case is it's a European case against International Skating Union. It's an international sport federation recognized by International Olympic Committee as the body globally administrating international speed skating and figure skating events. So it controls organization of such events as European or World Championship, as well as Winter Olympic Games. And the conduct was that according to some clauses in so-named eligibility rules adopted by the union, speed skaters were not allowed to participate in sport events organized by third party. They were not allowed to participate in sport events not authorized by this union or the members of the union. So, and thus, independent organizers of sport events met difficulties. Otherwise, such speed skaters would be subject of sanctions from just warning to lifetime ineligibility, which would mean impossibility to participate, for example, Winter Olympic Games. So all events organized by the union. So, and independent providers, independent organizers of sport events in this sphere met difficulties in attracting skaters, as nobody wanted to take a risk of becoming ineligible, thus being unable to participate very important sport events in this sphere. Okay. Well, and the union provided several efficiency arguments in order to justify this business practice. Mostly they were focused on the role of authorization. So the first 3 points are actually about authorization. So the union argues that hierarchy and the existence of one decision-making center contributes to the quality of the events, as rules are the same, requirements are the same, and so on. This also ensures that events do not clash to each other. So one decision-making center, it decides on the calendar. And pre-authorization protects this pyramid structure and protects the sole role of the union as the organizer of events in this sphere. So actually, it seems that the anti-competitive effect was presented as an efficiency in this case. And competition authorities said that, well, it cannot be interpreted in this way, so arguments are wrong, and efficiency had to be provided in a more precise way. So please tell us more about the benefits which are resulted from this sole role. Well, the union also mentioned protection from free riding, not explaining what was meant by this. So it argued that a lot of investments were made in development of the sport and administration of the sport, and it didn't want third parties to free ride on such investments. But again, argumentation was not very strong. Anyway, irrespective of existence or absence of such efficiencies, the union was not able to prove that this restriction, the ban for skaters to participate in third parties event, was the only way to reach the target. So indispensability criteria was not satisfied. There were no calculations of benefits, so consumer benefit criteria was not satisfied as well. So it was rejected completely. Okay. And the last group of cases, only one case here. So another group of cases is cartels, which are per se legal in majority of countries. So harm is supposed to be very big compared to benefits. So in many countries, including Russia, companies are not allowed to appeal to some efficiencies in some cases. In such cases. However, in other jurisdictions, it is possible, and we have one case that demonstrates this. Okay, next. And this is the case. And this is the case of market sharing. It was a case from UK. The clean room language services were under consideration. And the situation was so that there were several companies provided such services in the UK, and in 1980, they decided to set up a joint venture and started to provide the services under the same trademark. microclient. So after a number of mergers and acquisitions, the number of parties decreased to 2, and they controlled about 80% of the market. At some point of time, they decided to upgrade their trade license agreement, and they included explicit clauses on market sharing. So they are written, so there is a document in which market sharing is mentioned. And Competition Authority was able to prove that the company followed the strategy till the termination of the joint venture. And companies, yes, and companies provided 3 groups. Next slide. And companies provided 3 groups of arguments. The first group is the development of new production facilities. So information on investments was provided. They said a lot about the role of common management, about the role of trademark, and so on, common marketing standards. But all these investments were made before the relevant period of time. So they were not considered by Competition Authority. Next. Then companies tried to argue that they continued investment in these services. So they provided, again, examples. They provided information on investments, on introduction of new products, like MOPS systems, or something like this. So it was a lot of statistics related to this. And after analysis of all the data provided, Competition Authority said that, well, there might be some efficiencies, but they are related from cooperation, not from market sharing itself. So it's indispensability criteria. So it was not proved that the market sharing was the only way to reach the target. So this argument was rejected as well. And there was one more group of arguments that were a little bit related to geography, something like, so it's actually the end. So, no, yeah, next is fine. Well, this one. So reducing of transport costs thanks to better logistics, and efforts aimed to avoid potential customers' confusion, given that both companies worked under the same trademark. But again, these were just statements. And Competition Authority again said that, well, indispensability criteria is not satisfied as it is not clear how it is related to market sharing. So more arguments were needed. So actually, in all cases, we see quality arguments, pre-riding arguments, and need to recoup investments. So what theory actually predicts. But the quality of arguments was not strong enough, so infringement decisions were made in all the cases. So thank you for your attention. I believe I'm in time. Thank you very much.
So just to conclude, you saw that the goal of the presentation was to provide examples from different countries on what kind of efficiencies the authorities are willing to receive in either vertical or even here horizontal cases. The UK case is interesting as the authorities did found a document that explicitly divided markets geographically, but at the same time it accepted arguments because that was a clause in a trademark licensing agreement. So that's why the authority accepted instead of saying, oh, this is a cartel, I'm not going to accept any efficiencies. And I think that the main message that we have that even from different jurisdictions, it seems that those 5 criteria, 4 criteria that we have in indispensability, I'm trying to remember, I can't. Indispensability, the consumers benefit from it. That's what we see in different jurisdictions appearing, and of course, whether it's accepted or not here in Brazil, it depends on what the authority says, but it's available also in other countries. Yes, I think consumers benefit from it. That's the best thing.
Thank you very much, Luciano and Eduardo, the great presentation, and I will just pass the floor to Vitor, but just to invite you all to read the paper as a whole, because there are many more examples. Some very interesting findings that related to convergence and discussion about how is it that each jurisdiction plays with the clues, and how it would result in policies and different policies, and there any convergence. I'll not make it spoil, bring you a spoil, so I invite you to read the paper to get the whole picture. So
thank you, Bernardo. Thank you. First, I would like to greet IBRAC and FEA-USP for the initiative, and thank Professor Pontual and Professor Zetlana for their presence here. Considering the time, I'll try to be fast here. I think my job is to briefly share what we are doing in this working group of IBRAC, this working group of unilateral conduct. We are doing a research of cases here in Brazil of unilateral conduct. And this group is composed of about 25 lawyers and economists. And we are trying to use the same methodology that we use of Katsoulakos and Macri to create legal standard indicators in Brazil. And we won't have findings to share because we are in the middle of this work, but we learn a lot reading our paper and watching the presentation. And also we will be happy to share the results as soon as we have the final work. We are preparing this study based on cases ended after 2013, and we are divided into smaller groups. So we have groups responsible for self-preferencing, groups responsible for resale price maintenance, for exclusive agreements. And we are using the criteria of the analysis to reach legal standard indicators for each one of these categories. The three main questions that we are trying to answer with this case study is if you follow standardization of the analysis by type of conduct, what are the stages of this analysis, and if there are intervention triggers on these stages, and in the end, the definition of the magnitude of the remedies in unilateral conduct, and if these remedies follow a pattern here in Brazil. As I said, after detailing all these cases, each group will reach legal standard indicator, and we intend to reach this indicator from one, that is the strict per se, and the full effects based, that is the number 6, that is the graph of the level of the legal standard indicator. The deliveries of this group will be 2. So we will end with this spreadsheet, this complete spreadsheet registering all these details of the cases, and we will also prepare a report with the description of the main cases, with the indicator for each one of the conducts. We also want to identify the thresholds for some type of conducts, and to maybe that can serve as a guideline for strategic business decisions regarding unilateral conducts. And also we want to record the remedies applied and the way that they were designed by the Brazilian Antitrust Authority. And just to mention the differences between our work and the work of Professor Pontual and Zetlana, there are simple differences, but since we are restricted to Brazil, we could consider more cases. So we have more cases that this group is studying. We are not only considering cases of conviction, so we are not only considering infringement decisions, we are considering cases that the authority decided not to convict the parties. And also, since we are focusing in one jurisdiction, we could go deep in some details that will not be important to the legal indicator, to the legal standard indicator, but will serve as a reference for our work or for our report that we intend to go into details. So I think about the work of our group is that. As I said, we will be happy to share as soon as we have the results. And now, switching to the questions, I will start with a very open question that is regarding your research. We know that you worked with other economists and in many jurisdictions, and we wanted to hear from you about the main conclusions you reached about competition policy in general. In the paper, you tested some hypotheses, but feel free to share your findings about competition policy in general. And the second question is more related to the paper, and it's about the institutional architecture. That the paper mentioned that Brazil and India, compared to Russia and South Africa, seems to have higher legal standard indicators, and that a possible explanation to that is related to the difference in the institutional design of competition law enforcement. So regarding the Russian model, you mentioned that the Brazilian system is different from the Russian because you have the separation between decision-making and the investigation. But in Brazil, in some way, this absence of separation between the investigative body and the decision-making body is also a partial reality, considering the role of the general superintendents, because the general superintendents does the investigation, the process instruction, the reviewing of witness, request market studies, and all the main parts of the investigation. And the opinion of the general superintendents is very important for the casus tribunal final decision. So, putting into a question, does the study indicate that the best way to reach legal standard indicator is the complete separation between the investigative body and the decision-making body? And just a last point to this question, it's about the absence of separation between investigative and decision-making functions is not similar to what happens in jurisdictions that have a more sophisticated approach to unilateral conduct, as the European Commission, for example. So these are the first questions. Then I think Bernardo and Fabi will have more questions, but we can start with this one. Thank you again, and very happy to hear from you.
Okay, let me start. So thank you very much for your questions. So actually what you asked is related to our big research project, not to the part presented today. In general, what is found? So we compared legal standards across countries and across conduct groups, and we tested several hypotheses. The first intuitive hypothesis was that with time the quality of analysis should increase. So we expected to see that with time, deepness of economic analysis increasing. So we should go to this level. The development of theory of harm, analysis of efficiencies, balancing, and so on. So we expected to see more and more investigations that include the stages of analysis. But the reality is opposite. One of the results of our analysis is that with time, competition authorities become lazy. So maybe some time ago they tried to apply to this efficiency analysis, for example, but finally they decided it was not reasonable, because too complicated analysis gives companies more arguments to dispute the decision of competition authority. That might be one of explanation. Well, another result, which is again interesting, is that we expected that thanks to communication between competition authority, learning by doing, exchange of experience, there are a lot of conferences, the theoretical background is the same in all countries. So we expected to see some convergence. So we expected to see that they try to analyze similar cases in similar way. But the result is opposite. The result is opposite, and this means that there are some internal reasons for countries to apply their own legal standards. And they are not completely based on the differences in the law, as the law, in many cases, what is written in the law is the same, but application of the same norms is different. And that is the role of interpretation. Well, what else? The role of institutions. Well, of course, we consider only 4 jurisdictions at the moment. So it is difficult to make strong conclusions on this basis. But we see that, well, there is a difference between Russia and China, Russia and South Africa on one hand, and India and Brazil on the other. And there are 2 institutional features which correspond to this difference. One of the features is this division between investigating and decision-making functions. Actually, in Russia, it's the same team. The same team considers the case and decides on the case. That's all. There is no third party which assesses the quality of the analysis. So in this case, of course, the authority is not interested in deep analysis. Actually, in Russia, competition authority acts as a prosecutor. And this analysis of efficiency appears later, only in case companies appeal to annul the decision of FS. So actually, the main stage of competition cases analysis is courts, not FS, not the competition authority. And their companies provide efficiency arguments, and then this analysis starts. So there should be some third party which assesses the quality, this contributes, and it can be internal division between the bodies of the same authority as it is in Brazil, or different organizations. But this helps to improve the quality of decisions. So this is our vision. And the second difference was that it still is in the workloads. So Russian competition authority is multi-functioning. Actually, the most multi-functioning in the world. Everything: advertisement, consumer protection, procurement. Well, tariffs for natural monopolies. Everything. And actually, the same officers consider cases of different types from the different areas of the law. So sometimes they mix norms, sometimes they try to use norms from one law to reach targets of another law, something like this. So multifunctioning does not support good investigations. When the authority is specialized, it is motivated in getting more knowledge in the sphere of investigation. And I think it is so in Brazil. So what we see is that the quality of analysis in Brazil is, I would say, the highest compared to other BRICS countries. You should be proud.
And going back to your question about the European Union, you may argue that they're not separated, but there has been many landmark cases where the judicial review did impose changes. So it acts as a sword on the heads of the DG Comp, suggesting that they should be very careful actually proving harm and harm to competition, because in their situation, the judicial review will provide this separation that we have. Although the judiciary doesn't take the decisions themselves, but as it higher courts can actually decide and decide on the merits of the cases. It acted over time as this pressure to separate. Well, here the experience in Brazil, I would have to hear you, is that we don't have the higher courts acting as such. And more recently, well, not only third parties can complain on a decision of the SG to the tribunal, but also maybe more recently you may see the tribunal acting more independent from the view of the SG. So in this sense, we believe that although it's the same authority and it may change over time with more agreement or less agreement between both, and that's why we classify that informal. It can be separate. Third parties can argue for the change in the decision, and you all may always have tribunal commissioners that may ask to review a case. But we still consider that as separate, and so helping that being a positive view on the case handling by the SG.
Just have a question here. Thanks so much for your presentation. I just have a quick question. When you talk about the case that you were doing your research, and you have this step-by-step analysis, economic analysis, and one is the efficiency that you explained today. Do you have any, I mean, from the case that related to efficient analysis, which one do you think is the better one to have as an example? I mean, what you can do a good analysis when you talk about efficiency? Do you have any one that you can just spot and try to learn? And in other case that you can just, I mean, go a bit deeper?
Do you mean jurisdictions? Or?
No, I mean from the case that you have been just explained today. Do you have anyone that you think here? I mean, it's better in the next case. You can just try to do more in terms of economic analysis. What do you think about it?
From the cases that we presented, or any of the four you think
Yeah.
the efficiencies are more clearly presented and better, right?
Well, I would say, well, the four cases, anyway, analysis of efficiencies is weak in all cases, in all these cases. And actually, in all cases in our database, we do not need strong economic analysis for sure. And what is difficult in our case is that non-confidential version of the report does not provide us full information that was provided by companies and their arguments. It might be so that there were a lot of arguments and a lot of data, but we cannot see it. As there are a lot of documents, there are a lot of notes that see the document one, see the document two, see something like this. But the texts are not available for us. Well, argumentation in the very first case on washing machines, I would say was the strongest, maybe between comparing other cases, but it is weaker.
Yes, and because we selected those cases because when we read them the first time to do the classification, they were some of the few that the authority actually was willing to accept the deficiencies. It was just that sometimes you may see the authority, and that's something important for the classification that we did. You may see the authority quoting that, like in a report, well, in the middle of the decision of the authority, you have a paragraph that said, well, the parties argued that there were efficiencies of this kind. But if we don't see any reaction or rebuttal by the authority, we did not classify that as an actual efficiency presented by parties. So those were a few of the cases in the different countries that you actually see the authority addressing each one of the efficiencies, not only requesting them to be presented, but also addressing each one of them. And we just thought those were maybe most interesting compared to others. I think, yes, the South African one. The UK one, they're very clear about the criteria of indispensability that's required and non-alternative options to reach the same goals, and the necessity of proving that there were problems before and the solution and the restriction came to solve a problem. So unless you show that there were problems to be solved, the efficiencies will not be considered indispensable to solve the case. And what's surprising is that don't worry. I mean, if you think about those 6 steps, there are much fewer cases than you would expect also in, for example, Europe. And no, it's not that they do rule of reason for every vertical and they reach what in our ranking is level 6. There are very few level 6. There's maybe 2, 3, 4 out of 100. So don't worry, it's really rare to find such cases where the efficiency is really taken into account very deeply by the authority, where they yes, please tell me what the possibles are, and I'll explain you why I'm not accepting them. Often the author even ignores that they exist. We try to find some of the few that have very high ranking, that where the text you see the discussion. The Boston case also, I think, in India does have a good discussion of it's a very long, it's one of the longest reports, about 200 more than 200 pages, and so they go on and ask and address all deficiencies that are brought by the parties, either on those, both including intellectual property, which may be interesting for those that know the UFRJ case in Brazil. Though, as I said, it's not exactly the same, because the theory of harm was for the independent provider of services, not the manufacturers on top. But it's interesting to see that once I started reading, wait, I know this. It smells like, it looks like something, and it's warming to see that different jurisdictions face basically the same economic cases appearing in different countries. That's really nice when you start looking at the experience of other jurisdictions.
I'll just add a quick comment as we run out of time. Just a comment, it's not a question, so we just speaking away. But just taking a step back, we're talking about competition as a policy. So it is all about the choice governments would make, so to say, a means for development, as you have said. As we're now discussing worldwide, hot topics now related to almost every other policy. So industrial policy, by one, environmental, labor market, so on. But in the last decades, antitrust has become, alongside many other policies, monetary policies, a kind of a technocratic tool. And I think that we economists have contributed a lot to it in a sense. And it is like the policy has gained autonomy, and the tools and standards of analysis became the policy itself. So, for instance, as we go for vertical analysis, we have built up all over the many jurisdictions kind of the same tools to analyze legal standards, pretty much more comparable, so to say, at least. But the choices that government make to face vertical analysis, we would expect them to vary a lot because choices of the government policy. So we have like more Chicago-prone policies, on the other hand, more Brandeisian policies. So lots of variations. It could be a long shot, but by reading your paper, what strikes me is that you found no convergence at all. At all is I have not written that, but not even the economic analysis. So that would be the common ground, so to say. I'm not really in a position to make a national comparative analysis, but looking for a long time Brazilian partner, what I would find is almost an absence of a policy approach proper. And maybe this would explain a bit of this findings of those. And the absence of a policy, I would expect antitrust analysis to be prone to case by case, to ad hoc analysis and decision making and so on. So now we have, yes, just to analyze. Biden administration in the US now presented a policy, a full policy approach, and a stricter one back to the founding days, so to say. So let's see if down here they'll follow this lead and think we are prepared in terms of legal and economic tools and track records to have at last competition policy that would honor its name, so to say. So look, feel free just to ignore that comment.
Or maybe you can just.
Lucinda?
I have a question. There's a quite influential paper on efficiencies. It's somewhat theoretical. It's Siegel and Winston. It's on JPE or something that says that you not only must take into account the efficiencies as whether they are going to happen or not as well, but also whether the investments that were going to happen because of the exclusion restrictions and the exclusionary clauses and stuff will also crowd out investments that were going to happen anyway in the absence of the exclusion itself. In your case review, did you see any mention of any sort of this argument popping up in any of these cases? Because I know that all antitrust authorities will look into and see whether this is going to be an efficiency, it's going to be an investment, is it going to happen anyway, or something like that. But is there any mention of, okay, this investment is going to happen, but on the other hand, if this exclusionary clause or something were not in place, someone else would carry out some version of this investment anyway?
Well, not completely so, for sure, but it is related to indispensability criteria.
Yeah.
So companies were not able to prove that that was the only way to reach the target, including investments for sure. But we didn't need any mentioning of the argument that, well, other countries companies could do this in case of no investment on this. So, but indispensability criteria is a fact.
Maybe, Victor, do you wanna just make your last questions and then you can finish?
Okay.
Yeah. Or
Yeah. It's in Brazil about unilateral conducts. I'm not sure if you know, but the general superintendent created a specific coordination for cases of unilateral conduct. Between other reasons, I think these measures in line with international recommendations to increase speed of this type of investigation and to have a specific coordination for these cases. Do you think this is a good policy? I'm not sure if you, in this jurisdiction that you analyzed, you have an opinion about that, and if the reason for that is that they created for the solution. So if with these specific coordinations, it tends to have more have faster cases and specific analysis for this type of economy.
I think it's useful to speed the process because it creates a memory of previous cases in the mind of those that are the case handlers. It helps them to invest because they'll be using that often on the economic arguments and efficiently. I think it's useful. And I've seen that they, at the same time, made statements that they would try to make as much rule of reason as they think it's reasonable. I think it's positive to have specialized in the sense that from the staff itself, you don't have to focus on different ideas. You can study, you can invest your time to learn about specific cases or specific type of conducts and how to analyze them. Maybe it also increases predictability from the other side, as you may possibly will see the methodology of analysis being repeated itself. Of course, you may argue that the downside is that if there are some kind of handicap that they always do, it will become more solidified because it's the same staff that are handling different cases over and over and over again. But I think it's possible. It's again one of the arguments of specialization leading to better analysis, possibly so. I think simply for them that they have to invest on understanding what the arguments are and provide, and they seem to be open to listening to them.
So, you want to make any final comments before you go? No? So, thank you very much, everybody, for being here today. Lucinda, if you wanted to come just to finish on
I suppose I need to go there because the camera, right?
Yeah.
so, just to finish your
I need to show up. Okay, thanks a lot. I'm Claudio Lucinda. I'm the department chair of economics here, and it's an honor to have IBRAC here. It's an honor to have you guys presenting your paper, and I hope that's just the beginning of a very fruitful collaboration. We are more than welcome to host you guys whenever you want. Thanks a lot, and hope I can see you around in next opportunity. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.